the Mongol prince. He was born on the endless steppe, where the wind never sleeps and the earth stretches beyond the horizon. His name was Hulagu Khan, grandson of the great Genghis, heir to a legacy of conquest and fear. From the moment he could walk, Hulagu was taught the way of the horse and the bow. The Mongols did not raise princes in palaces of gold. They raised them under the sky, in the dust, the cold, and the blood of the hunt. By the time he was a teenager, Hulagu could ride for days without food, shoot an arrow through the eye of a running deer, and command men twice his age. He grew up listening to the stories of his grandfather, Genghis Khan, the thunder of the steppes, the man who had crushed kingdoms like dry twigs. Hulagu's blood burned with the same ambition. But the world he inherited was not empty. It was filled with ancient cities, powerful sultans, and holy men who believed themselves untouchable. The Mongol Empire had already stretched from the Pacific to the edge of Europe. Now, under Hulagu, its gaze turned south and west, to the lands of Persia, Mesopotamia, and the beating heart of Islam. In 1251, Hulagu's brother Monk Khan became Great Khan and ordered him to lead a new campaign. His mission was clear: subdue the remaining enemies of the Mongols in the Middle East, destroy the sect of the Assassins in the mountains of Persia, break the power of the Caliph in Baghdad, and bring the crescent under the hoof of the horse. It was a command Hulagu accepted without hesitation. He was no ordinary prince. He was a storm riding out of the east, a shadow that would darken the skies of ancient cities. And so, the Mongol banners were raised. Tens of thousands of warriors gathered on the steppe, horse archers, siege engineers from China, catapults that could hurl stones heavier than a man. The greatest army the Middle East had ever seen was moving. And at its head, Hulagu Khan rode, silent and deadly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The world did not yet know his name. But soon it would tremble at it. The year was 1253. The Mongol Empire, already stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea, turned its gaze on a new horizon. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, had been chosen to lead an army unlike any the Middle East had ever seen. Tens of thousands of horsemen assembled on the steppe. Each man carried a composite bow, capable of piercing armor at deadly range. Siege engineers came from faraway China, hauling catapults and siege towers, instruments of destruction never before seen in Persia. Artisans, translators, astrologers, and spies followed in their wake. This was not just an army, it was a moving civilization built for conquest. The first target lay in the mountains of northern Persia, the Nizari Ismailis, known to Europe as the Assassins. For centuries, they had terrorized kings and sultans from their hidden fortresses, striking from the shadows with daggers and poison. Their leader, the Imam of Alamut, believed his mountain citadel unassailable. But the Mongols had come. In 1256, Hulagu's army began its march into Persia. They crossed rivers with bridges of rope and ice, burned cities that resisted, and crushed local rulers under their hooves. Witnesses described black banners blotting out the sun, the ground shaking with the passage of so many horses. Entire towns fled at the mere rumor of their approach. When Hulagu reached the mountains of Alamut, he did not rush. He built a ring of steel and stone around the assassin stronghold, cutting off every escape. He brought Chinese siege engineers to the front, men who had toppled the walls of China itself. Catapults hurled stones heavier than oxen into the fortress walls. Fire arrows rained from the sky. The assassins, long feared as ghosts, found themselves facing an enemy they could not stab in the dark. Hulagu gave them one chance to surrender. Some fortresses capitulated immediately. But Alamut, the greatest of them all, resisted. For weeks, the mountains echoed with the roar of siege weapons. Finally, the walls cracked. The Mongols stormed the fortress, slaughtering the defenders. The libraries and gardens of Alamut, once a center of learning and secret knowledge, went up in flames. In one stroke, Hulagu Khan had erased a sect that had haunted the Islamic world for centuries. The assassins were no more. But this was only the beginning. Persia itself lay ahead, the ancient cities of Hamadan, Ray, and Tabriz. One after another, they fell before the Mongols. Those who resisted were exterminated. Those who surrendered were spared, sometimes. By 1257, the road to the greatest prize of all lay open, Baghdad. For 5 centuries, Baghdad had stood as the jewel of the Islamic world, the seat of the Abbasid Caliphs, heirs of the Prophet. Its libraries held the knowledge of Greece, Persia, and India. Its mosques and palaces dazzled travelers from across the earth. To the faithful, it was untouchable, protected by God. But Hulagu Khan did not believe in their God. He believed in the destiny of the Mongols. And as his army advanced, even the Caliph began to tremble. The storm was moving toward Baghdad, and nothing could stop it. It was the year 1258. The city of Baghdad, jewel of the Islamic world, stood like a dream by the banks of the Tigris. Its domes glistened like gold under the winter sun. Its libraries held the wisdom of centuries, Greek philosophy, Persian science, Indian mathematics, and the works of Muslim scholars. For 500 years, it had been the beating heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. And yet, beyond its walls, a storm gathered. Hulagu Khan had arrived. At his back stood an army like a living tide: Mongol horse archers, Chinese siege engineers, Armenian and Georgian auxiliaries, and war machines never before seen in Mesopotamia. Catapults capable of hurling boulders as big as a man. Giant crossbows that could pierce towers. Siege engines covered in rawhide to resist fire. The Caliph al-Mustasim believed the city divinely protected. For centuries, Baghdad had survived invasions, plagues, and rival empires. He sent messages of defiance to Hulagu, refusing to surrender. But Hulagu had crushed the Assassins of Alamut. He had burned the mountains of Persia. And now he encircled Baghdad with a ring of steel and fire. In January, the Mongols began their siege. They dammed the Tigris, cutting off the city's water. They hurled flaming projectiles over the walls day and night. Towers crumbled under the constant bombardment. The sky above Baghdad glowed red from fire. Inside the city, panic spread. Scholars clutched their manuscripts. Families huddled in mosques, praying for a miracle. The Caliph sent envoys to negotiate. Hulagu demanded total surrender. The Caliph hesitated, believing God would intervene. But God did not intervene. On February 10th, the Mongols breached the walls. What followed was a slaughter unlike anything the city had seen. For a week, Baghdad was given over to blood and fire. Soldiers, scholars, women, children, tens of thousands were cut down. The Tigris ran black with ink as the House of Wisdom, the greatest library of the age, was cast into the river. Books, manuscripts, centuries of knowledge vanished overnight. Witnesses said the water of the Tigris turned black with ink and red with blood. The Caliph himself was captured. Hulagu refused to shed his blood, a Mongol taboo for royal prisoners, but he had him executed in a manner even more humiliating. Some say he was trampled to death, wrapped in carpets. Others say he starved. In any case, the last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad was gone. The city that had once been the light of the world lay in ruins. Hulagu had achieved what no conqueror before him had done. The heart of Islam had been pierced. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had ruled for centuries, was no more. But in destroying Baghdad, Hulagu also destroyed a golden age. Scholars, scientists, and poets, gone. Libraries turned to ash. Knowledge lost forever. To the Mongols it was a victory. To the world it was a catastrophe. And still Hulagu rode on. His armies turned their eyes to Syria, to Damascus, and beyond. The Mongol storm had not yet spent its fury. But in the shadows, a new enemy was gathering. One who would strike back at the invincible Mongols. Baghdad had fallen. Its domes lay shattered, its libraries drowned, its markets silent. The city that once rivaled Rome and Constantinople in glory was now a graveyard of ash and ink. For Hulagu Khan it was his greatest triumph. He had destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate, an empire that had ruled for centuries. With Baghdad gone, no power in the Middle East could match him. The Mongol banner now cast its shadow from the mountains of Persia to the banks of the Euphrates. But for the Islamic world, it was an unhealed wound. Baghdad had been more than a capital. It was the heart of scholarship, trade, and faith. Travelers spoke of the Tigris still black with ink weeks after the siege. Priceless works of Aristotle, Avicenna, and Al-Khwarizmi, lost forever. The House of Wisdom, which had preserved ancient knowledge for the world, gone in a single week of fire. Across the Middle East, panic spread. Cities sent envoys of surrender before the Mongols even arrived. Mosques prayed for protection. Some rulers offered tribute, some offered their daughters in marriage, hoping to avert destruction. Hulagu accepted gifts and tribute, but never forgot his mission. His army moved like a tide across Mesopotamia. Mosul, Aleppo, and Damascus trembled as news of Baghdad's destruction reached them. Even Christian princes in the region, Armenians, Georgians, allied themselves with him, believing the Mongols were the unstoppable scourge of Islam. Hulagu's court in Tabriz became a center of power. He built palaces and gardens, blending Mongol nomadic tradition with Persian luxury. His queen, Dokuz Khatun, a Nestorian Christian, used her influence to protect some Christian communities, but for Muslims the Mongols were terror incarnate. Yet even at his peak, Hulagu's power was fragile. The Mongol Empire was vast but stretched thin. News came from the east. The great Khan monk Hulagu's brother had died. The succession crisis in Mongolia forced many troops to return home, weakening Hulagu's army at the very moment he stood on the edge of complete domination of the Middle East. And as the Mongols prepared to march into Syria, a new force emerged to oppose them, one that would prove the Mongols were not invincible. The Mamluks of Egypt, slave soldiers turned sultans, hardened by years of war and disciplined beyond imagination. Led by the brilliant Sultan Qutuz and his commander Baybars, they prepared to make a stand. In the shadow of Hulagu's victories, the first cracks in the Mongol storm were forming. The world had watched the destruction of Baghdad in horror. Now it waited to see, would the Mongols sweep through Syria and Egypt as they had Persia and Iraq? Or would they finally meet their match? The year was 1260. The Middle East lay bruised and burned under the hoofbeats of Hulagu Khan's army. Persia had fallen. Baghdad lay in ashes. Cities surrendered before the Mongol banners even appeared on the horizon. To many, the Mongols were not an army, they were a natural disaster, like a storm or an earthquake. But storms fade. And somewhere to the south in Egypt, a new power had risen. They were the Mamluks, warriors born in slavery but forged in steel, disciplined like no army the world had seen. They had no fear of the Mongols because they had nothing to lose but their freedom. At their head stood Sultan Qutuz, a man of iron will, and his general Baybars, a soldier whose tactical genius would become legend. As the Mongols advanced into Syria, burning Aleppo and capturing Damascus, Qutuz gathered his forces in Cairo. He would not wait for the storm to reach him. He would ride out to meet it. Hulagu Khan had left a portion of his army in Syria under his trusted general, Kitbuka, while he himself returned east to deal with the succession crisis after his brother Monk's death. But even this portion was a force of devastation. Tens of thousands of seasoned Mongol warriors supported by Christian allies from Armenia and Georgia. In the summer heat of September 1260, the two armies marched toward a valley in Palestine known as Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath. It was a place of ancient echoes, where the story of David and Goliath had been told. Now a new Goliath, the Mongols, stood ready to crush their challenger. The Mamluks prepared carefully. Baybars knew the Mongols' tactics. The feigned retreats, the ambushes, the relentless cavalry. He turned their own playbook against them. Hiding troops in the hills, he planned to lure the Mongols into a trap. At dawn on September 3rd, the Mongol vanguard swept into the valley. Dust rose like a red mist, the sound of hooves like thunder. Kitbuka himself led the charge, confident of another easy victory. But this time the enemy did not break. The Mamluks fought like men possessed, their ranks holding firm against the Mongol onslaught. Arrows darkened the sky. Steel clashed with steel. Baybars's cavalry darted in and out, striking like falcons. Then, at the critical moment, the Mamluks executed their trap. They feigned a retreat, drawing the Mongols deeper into the valley. Kitbuka, hungry for a kill, chased them, only to find himself surrounded. Hidden Mamluk forces erupted from the hills, cutting off the Mongols' escape. The valley became a killing ground. The Mongols, who had never been truly defeated in open battle, were stunned. Kitbuka fought bravely, refusing to surrender. He was captured and executed on the field, a symbolic reversal of Mongol terror. When the dust cleared, the unthinkable had happened. The Mongols had been defeated. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. The tide of conquest had reached its high-water mark and begun to ebb. For the Islamic world, Ain Jalut was not just a victory. It was a turning point. The same land that had seen David slay Goliath had now seen a new David. The Mamluks slay a new Goliath, the Mongols. For Hulagu Khan, still in the east, the news was a shock. His unstoppable army had been stopped. The Middle East would never again be his for the taking. The storm had broken. Hulagu Khan, the grandson of Genghis, who had burned cities and shattered empires, now found himself standing at the edge of a new reality. Ain Jalut had shown the world that the Mongols could bleed. But Hulagu did not vanish after his defeat. He returned to his base in Tabriz, reorganizing his forces, fortifying his realm. He still ruled over vast lands, Persia, Mesopotamia, Armenia, and his court glittered with Persian craftsmen, Chinese engineers, and foreign envoys. His was still the largest and most powerful empire in the Middle East. He established what would come to be known as the Ilkhanate, a Mongol Khanate that blended steppe traditions with Persian governance. Under Hulagu, taxes were collected, roads were rebuilt, trade routes reopened. Even as he was feared, he laid the foundations for a new order in the region. Yet his name remained dark in the memory of Islam. Baghdad's destruction had left a wound that would never fully heal. Scholars called him the Scourge of God. Poets wrote of the rivers of blood and ink he had unleashed. The House of Wisdom, lost forever, became a symbol of what was at stake when civilization meets conquest. Hulagu himself seemed to understand that his legacy was double-edged. He built gardens and palaces, sponsored astronomy and engineering, but also continued ruthless campaigns against those who resisted him. He was both destroyer and builder, thunder and silence. His personal life was shaped by contrast too. His favorite wife, Genghis Khan, was a devout Nestorian Christian. Her influence spared many Christian communities in the Middle East even as Muslim populations suffered. This earned Hulagu a complex reputation: villain to some, protector to others. He never again tried to conquer Egypt. The Mamluks had proven themselves too strong, and his focus turned inward, consolidating his realm, securing his dynasty. In 1265, just 5 years after Ain Jalut, Hulagu Khan died at the age of 48. He was buried on an island in Lake Urmia, his grave kept secret, according to Mongol tradition. The Mongol tide he unleashed, however, did not die with him. His descendants, the Khans, would rule Persia for decades, eventually converting to Islam themselves. The Middle East he left behind was forever changed, its political map redrawn, its cultural memory scarred. And so history remembers him as a paradox. Hulagu Khan, the destroyer of Baghdad, yet the founder of a new state. The heir of Genghis Khan who carried the Mongol storm to the gates of Egypt, only to be turned back. 8 centuries later, his shadow still lingers in the ruins of Baghdad, in the chronicles of Persian historians, in the songs of Mongol bards. His name, like a cold wind from the steppe, whispers of both power and loss. The world he burned is gone. But the lessons of his rise and fall, the dangers of unchecked conquest, the fragility of civilization, remain as urgent as ever.